would all this take?
Christmas. We're aiming for Christmas.
Oh.
I want to be able, you talked about Christmas presents. I wanted to be able to have a, one of my famous, I always hold them up, the little mini computer things that I can pass around and other people can view. So I'm going to have a couple of those and be able to pass them out to people as Christmas present so they can take it home and watch it and share it with their families and so forth. Anyway, this time, rather than go into the book, your autobiography, which you've been going through, started with your life and your early childhood memories. But one thing you didn't cover, and I just want to pick up whatever slight memories you have of your parents. And you always say that, they were very secretive and didn't tell you much, which must have made it all the more interesting to actually burrow and try and trick them into telling stories about their relatives. And
well, there wasn't anything. They just weren't people that talked about that, and I didn't care when I lived there. I mean, it wasn't of interest to me. If something came up that I wanted to know something about their previous life, then I could ask and they'd tell me.
Where did they meet and where did they marry?
Okay. I'll tell you just a little bit. I just told Patty about this the other day because she asked me. I said something and she wanted to know more. Anyway, my mother, both of them quit school. He was in Texas and she was in Louisiana at the age of 16.
Okay.
Both of them did the same thing. So maybe it was sort of the thing to do in those days. If you had any ambition or wanted to get out of a small town or a family or something. Because they both did the same thing and they were completely different and far, far apart. But my father left home when he was just about 12 or 13.
Mm-hmm.
And he just, all by himself, he went all over the United States. He went to California, and he went to Omaha, and he would get a job. He was what they would call a professional, and he was just a kid, really. When I say he left when he was 12 or 13, but it was probably older than that, maybe 14 or 15.
Had he apprenticed in a print shop?
Yes, his dad ran the newspaper in his hometown in Texas.
Uh-huh.
And he didn't like his dad. I mean, his dad wanted him to be this, that, and the other, and there were rough words. And one day he just left.
Did he have lots of brothers and sisters? Or?
No, none. No? Well, one sister.
One sister. What was the hometown? Do you remember?
Texas. No,
okay. That's okay.
Anyway, maybe if I saw a lot of names, there would be some connection. But we never went back or anything.
Yeah.
My grandmother, his sister got married, and where did she live? In some larger city in Texas. And his father died, but I remember his father, my grandfather.
Mm-hmm.
He used to come visit us in the summertime, and I can remember he would take Frederick and me, take each one by the hand and go into the drugstore, which was the only place in Waterloo that sold candy, and he would buy us candy. And so I remember him very fondly. But he died before I ever got into my teens, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And now what am I leading at?
And the mother, the sister had married.
And so my sister, his sister was Aunt Myrtle, and his mother, she lived still with his mother.
Mm-hmm.
And his mother used to come up and spend the summer at our house. See, we were up in Nebraska.
Yeah.
And they were all in Texas. And in those days, that was a long way. But two different kinds of neighborhoods. Texas and the South was just different in many ways, in the way they lived and raised their kids and everything. Then we were quite different.
Well, that was cowboy days, really. You're talking about turn of the century, before the turn of the 19th to the 20th century, and there was no Dallas or Houston. There was no big cities at that time in Texas. No. It was country, all cows.
And my mother was in Louisiana, and so when she ran away, or when she quit living at home.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how they got together, but she got together with Cora, who was a girl, but she was, at the time, I think my mother was only about 15 or 16 maybe, I don't know. But Cora was probably like 19 or 20, which was grown up then.
Mm-hmm.
And she and my mother, how they did this, I don't know. But they bought a newspaper in a little tiny town in Texas and ran it, printed the newspaper, the two girls, for I think 2 or 3 years. And my dad became a salesman for things that were used in newspapers.
Okay.
And so he eventually came into theirs, and they fell in love and got married. And when they did, they both wanted to get out of the South.
Yeah.
And they came north. And he had been up in Omaha, and he really liked that. And he could get a job, just walk in and get a really good paying job, because he knew how to do the
linotype.
Yes.
Yeah. Set print. Yeah.
And so that's how I got to Omaha. I mean, I was born in Omaha.
Now, all these travelings, your father doing when he was young, and your mother, how would they be getting around? This is before the car, so this is by train. Trains.
It was all trains.
Train travel. And so when the relatives came up from Texas, they came up on the train.
It was a big deal when my grandmother came up from Texas, because it was like a 2-day train trip.
Yeah.
A day and a half.
Well, it's a long way. It's thousands of miles. Yeah.
Yeah, she had to sleep on the train.
Yeah.
And so when we went down there, so when all this, we had grandmother visiting us a lot. Every summer almost. She came up and stayed a month at least. So I knew her really well. And when I got to be 16, my mother wanted to take my brother and me down to show us all to her old friends and relatives.
Right.
In the southern part of Louisiana. And so that's the first trip that I was remembered it.
That town was right on the border, wasn't it, of Louisiana and Texas?
I can't even remember. If I saw a map, I could tell you the name. It was a one-syllable town.
Okay.
And but I don't remember anything. The main thing I remember about that trip was my boy cousin. I was 16. He was about 19. And of course I just got
all fluttery about him.
Fluttery about him.
Yeah.
And he put up with me. But he would take me around to things. And what Patty's talking about is that if you go, it's still true, if you go down to that area in Louisiana, one of the things you do if you're sightseeing there's an island, a big island, just a half hour by boat off the coast. And they have boats going back and forth all the time, and you can go out there, and I'm sure by this time it's all different, but you could go out there and have lunch, you know, but you had to take like a half-hour boat ride to get there.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a big deal. To be on a ship. I'd never been on a ship ever, right? Because Omaha.
Yeah, it's a long ways from the ocean.
Water in your bathtub. I mean, there's no water anywhere. It's a dry area, and so this was all new to me. But and so I.
Did the cousin come along on that trip? The boy, the 19-year-old?
Probably.
Yeah.
I don't remember.
Yeah. It was all new and exciting.
It was not new to him, probably not. But since somebody had probably had to come with us to kind of show us the way, because my mother was not much of a traveler.
Okay.
But it was an easy thing. You just went down, bought a ticket, got on the boat, and went over there, and you'd come right back. You'd have lunch, and I remember the lunch was they had a professional cook, and just the fire was probably almost as big as this room on the ship, and they cooked on it. That's the way I remember it.
Yeah.
And
so they barbecued, basically.
something like that.
Yeah.
You wouldn't call it that then.
But no.
There wasn't any such word then.
So, what year did your parents marry? Do you remember? Well, you won't remember.
1910.
1910.
And I was born in 1912.
I wondered, just what the prospects were for young people getting married in 1910. I mean, I know people getting married in the 30s in the Depression, and you've talked about getting married to Dickie and so forth. It was struggling times. I mean, it was poor times. And
well, as I say, that was one thing they never had to worry about, because both of them could walk into any newspaper or print shop and get a job because they were proficient.
It's probably the equivalent these days of being a computer guru.
Yeah,
if you
like that.
If you can work with computers,
there weren't very many people that could do things like that.
Right. Yeah, and good skill is usable anywhere. Yeah, anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody needs good.
But what happened then? They had me, and decided that they didn't want me to grow up in a big city like Omaha. Probably had 2,000 or 3,000 people, and they both were this way. They both wanted not to be dependent on somebody giving them a salary. They wanted to be independent, and they saved their money enough and went out and bought this little newspaper in Waterloo, Nebraska. And of course, it didn't amount to much when they bought it. I used to know, it's as ridiculous as this, that I think the I Met business, which was a little tiny building with a print shop machinery in it.
Mm-hmm.
I think they got it for $90.
Yeah.
Anyhow, it was almost that that was the way things were then.
Yeah.
And so we moved down there, and they had to find a place to live and get started on the business. Of course, I was only, well, they had Frederick then. I was 5 or 6.
And your Frederick was
5 years old, because I started in kindergarten there.
And Frederick was about
2.5 or 3 years younger than me.
Yeah.
And so there was quite a lot of buying and selling, and we ended up with a 2-story building, but the only one in town. And my dad put his linotype machine, which made him so much above anybody else in the same kind of business, in the bottom part, and we lived in the second story. I had to go up downstairs. We had no bathroom, just a wooden toilet.
Outside?
Ours was on the first floor.
Oh, okay.
But it wasn't outside.
Yeah.
That we were a little bit above that. So when
Not much, but a little.
I went away to college. They told me later that my dad said when she comes home, she's going to be ashamed of not having a bathroom, because everybody in her, they sent me to a fancy girls' school, and they were all rich girls.
Monticello, yeah.
Yes. And so the first year I went away to school, he put in a bathroom in our house, and it was true. I would have felt, funny about it.
Well, I'm sure he invited all the neighbors in to watch how this newfangled thing worked, and it's like getting a TV, the first in your neighborhood. Woo. Yeah.
Because everybody had toilets outdoors. I grew up until I went away to school with an outdoor toilet, 100%.
Yeah, well, and yeah, you really, in your early life, saw the beginnings of a lot of technology. One, indoor plumbing, but also the car, the telephone, all that kind of stuff was just coming in. It was brand airplanes.
And
radio.
All my early food was cooked on my mother had to put wood
burning stove
in the stove. The stove didn't look too different, and there was a big holder on the side of the stove which you kept filled with water, and the heat from whenever you used it heated this water. So usually, most of the time, I would put a big tub in the kitchen and put hot water in it. So that was my bath. But by the time I got back from first year school, my dad had put in a full-fledged bathroom.
Yeah.
And because he knew it would be quite a joke,
Okay. Any other now your grandmothers? You both visited them in Texas and Louisiana. What about your mother's Louisiana people?
Well, she didn't have any parents. I don't. She was never clear about. Well, she ran away from home and she never went back. But she had brothers. She had 2 or 3 brothers, and they lived in. One of them lived in Iowa, and we went over and visited him one time. But she had no contact with her parents, or I never saw them. And really nobody else in the family. When she quit, she quit. And she never talked about it.
Did she keep in contact with her brothers?
No.
I mean, you visited the Iowa one, but...
She knew their address. But as far as...
Annual letters, Christmas cards, any of that kind of stuff?
Nothing like that.
No.
That I remember. Could have been, I just didn't notice. was never a big deal.
When
My
she came up,
dad's family was a big deal. They all visited, and
yeah.
we visited them. And what was the name of the town in Texas?
I think it's written down somewhere. I've
Yeah.
seen the name before. The yeah, people weren't writing lengthy "what went on this year" type Christmas cards at all to keep the family
Well, I don't
going.
think there was any. Well, there must have been, yes, because my dad, that was one of the things he sold and made money on, was Christmas cards.
Okay.
And he sort of introduced Christmas cards.
Yeah.
But if you sent out tens, that was a lot,
Yep.
but it wasn't a big deal.
Now, when your mother came to California years later, did you have long, deep, not discussions with her?